Good afternoon, Mike Winkler here, and I wanted to take a minute to talk about a refresh of a topic. I wanted to go over the user behavioral analytics, kind of how much of times have changed, and it's kind of changed along with us. Okay, so UBA, right? Something we first did in 2016 in August, and it was the app that was the big wow that everybody couldn't get a NIF of because it would give us the all this user behavioral data. Okay, fair enough. Things have only gotten better, right? But if you kind of just start back from the beginning, we started out by defining three characteristics: users over time, users by rights, and users by connection. So we could determine if a user that normally logged in between 8 and 5 suddenly started logging in at 3 a.m. Or if a user that is normally just hitting normal salespeople stuff and suddenly starts looking at C $ share in the infrastructure. Or users by connection to say that, hey, that's a site that might be malware associated or is attached to a foreign country you don't do business with, that kind of thing. And it'll get us all of this user data and put it into the Qradar SIM model. I'm like, okay, that's great. And that's what we did in 2016, and it's done very, very well for itself. But 2 years later, we're asking the question, now that we have all of these data points, what can we use them for? And the answer is, it's about a lot of interlocking technology, right? I try not to use any acronyms at all, but some of these pages would get cumbersome if I didn't put any acronyms in. There is user behavioral analytics, which is what we're here to talk about. There is DNS analytics, right? And I mean that in the kind of standard means of DNS, domain name services. And there is QNI, or Qradar Network Insights. So these are a couple of the plugins, or in the case of QNI, it's hardware that all interlock inside Qradar to get you more data, better data, and get it to you sooner. But let's dig into the details on this. Okay, I've intentionally used the old graphics of the UBA dashboard and say this is our dashboard as you can see it in user behavioral analytics. This is not the coolest part of UBA, but it allows you to go through and see what your users have been doing that they probably shouldn't have. In this case, we are digging into a user who has behavior, access, and time violations that is probably doing things they shouldn't do, right? So, okay, fair enough. We drill into that, and I can see that this is someone who has a relevance of 1, severity of 10, credibility of 5, that someone is hitting a risky site. Okay, so it's something that might be a problem except nothing actually happened. Worth knowing, right? Monitor your user behaviors. Well and done. This was UBA 2 years ago. Now we're starting to see things like flow rules, behavioral rules, and machine learning. If someone normally is in Helsinki, I'm going to know that that's their normal daytime. If Jim is in Los Angeles, except he travels to Colorado twice a month on business, I'm going to know that. Okay, so we're going to see all these normal things for time and behavior. If I've got someone who's in my, my penetration testing group and they are forever hitting malware sites, we're going to know that. Okay, so there's all of these that's a combination of kind of behavioral and machine learning. Where the line is between behavioral and machine learning is tough, okay? But this gives you a bunch of new data that's not just things we get from log events, but things we get from NetFlow and from behavioral things. And this is the slide over that we see in the new version of it that says, hey, this particular user has been going from Romania to an internal address. I bet that one's viewing backwards and is having an authentication failure, right? So this is kind of what the new dashboard version of it looks like. So when we originally built this for you, there was 70 custom rules, more or less. This is a very dynamic number. It changes all the time. On my current Qradar system, and this is middle of July 2018, I've got 230 custom rules, both as user behavioral itself has updated, and as things like QNI, Qradar Network Insights, and DNS Analytics have updated, more things make use of these rules. Now, it is super important to say that I don't expect any user to ever write rules. You can if you want to. You don't ever have to. So these are things out of the box, right? I've got a user who's been on excessively long or is hitting an anonymizer, unexpected country, all of these things you look at. This is my old rules. They're good rules. They're all still here. And this is smart, out of the box, just happens. You need to do literally nothing after initial Qradar tuning period, right? Okay, cool. I want to talk about how things interlock here. So if we take a look at Network Insights, this is something that sits, it's a piece of hardware and it sits in your NetFlows, and I can get flow forensics and I can tell things like data exfiltration via protocol tunneling because we're doing protocol decodes, right? And we can say, oh, I've got confidential data being sent to a foreign country, and this is a big deal. I can tell a lot of this by header information if something's confidential. So I've got this information, and that's great, and that goes right into Qradar. And I also have the DNS analytics. And guys, if you have not had a chance to download DNS analytics and take a look at this, you should. It's $0. It's like UBA, fits right into your Qradar, and it makes a big deal difference. But what this does is this allows me to see if someone is hitting a squatted DNS. That is to say, they're being rerouted by some piece of malware or ransomware, and it looks like Slittybank, or it looks like Microsift, right? Something that looks reasonable from the get-go, but it's being squatted by somebody else. If something's been blacklisted, that is to say, X-Force or somebody else has said that DNS is part of a malware campaign or part of a bad actor or a ransomware campaign. If it's a suspect, but DGA, or a digitally generated algorithm, there's a lot of DNS out there that are not machine readable, that aren't human readable. They're just a lot of junk code. So we can spot by looking at these digitally generated algorithm servers who the bad actors are, often before they start acting bad. And there's a whole presentation out there in DNS analytics, and I don't want to lose a bunch of time on it. But this allows you to see who the ransomware guys are, the bad actors, often before the first malware pulse. And it all fits together. So this is just some more rules of the 230. I can tell if someone's hitting a squatting domain. I can tell if I have a machine being accessed by a service account and not a user account. If an exploit tool is actually in use, not just present, right? Updates on and on. So this is examples of, and by no means is this all, places where the new rules inside user behavioral have made this better by using the functions of the other things around it, by using Q&A hardware or by using DNS analytics. The whole thing gets very, very smart. It still floats on top of a layer of Qradar. It still generates offenses. It's still all of the Qradar you know and love from log events, but it's also a lot of other things as well. Okay, I want to talk about Watson, because Watson is, and if you've been living in a cave and you don't know about Watson, this is our cognitive assistant for security, and it does quick turnarounds for you on research, and it does good research based on our AI every night. Reads the internet, essentially. So it goes through and it says, hey, I've read Krebs on security, and I've read the dark web, and I've read the Microsoft blog, and all this crazy crap. So that when you have a problem, Watson gets user-based information, right? It gets all the log events, it gets all the flows, it gets user information, it gets DNS information. So I will give you good threat intelligence data in your Qradar in minutes. Watson goes through and does the research and turns it around on you in minutes. So this sits on top of user behavioral. So if you start seeing either a bad actor in your environment or an actor that's acting a little crazy, you're worried they're compromised or the credentials have been compromised, this gives you the quickest possible turnaround for something has or has not been compromised. Okay. The user watch list is something also that's been around for a while. I have my users on the left, and I've taken MPIC and put him on the watch list because this is a guy I'm kind of curious what's going on. And we've discovered his real name is Robert Smith. Okay, fair enough. And I drill into what Robert's doing, and I see that he's attempting to log in with explicit credentials instead of Active Directory credentials. It's what you're not supposed to be doing. This might be a hack. This might be an advanced user being a jerk. We don't know. But it's a question worth asking, right? I don't know if this would generate an offense because you have to see how your thresholds were set, but it's worth looking at. Okay, and after this, I can see what his risk score over time is, and this guy's been a jerk for a while, so I would reach out and see what was going on with him. But on top of that, right, and this is what we've had since that very first UBA version and that very first video of it, but the machine learning is giving us so many great things. If you look at that sand chart up at the top, the kind of pastel color one, it shows you approximately what time there are activities out of this particular user, Jay Steinberg, and when he is most likely to be active and when something's aberrant. I can see his risk posture, both the organization and his as a person. Okay, and we can go through and we can set up specific views for this to say, well, the third Tuesday of the month, I kind of wonder what Jay's doing. So it's going to go through and it's going to use machine learning and it's going to create patterns for what's going on in that user's data. Guys, this is still $0, still goes right on your Qradar. If you're a big-sized environment, you're likely to need an app node. There's an app node video if you don't know what that is. But this is all just expansion in the $0 user behavioral analytics engine. Okay, so it comes down to the question, what does UBA mean in 2018? There's a whole lot of data that goes into UBA, to user behavioral analytics. There's a lot of intelligence. There's a lot of good things that go in there. UBA is no longer a cool add-on. It is absolutely core to the function of your security analytics. 2 years ago, we said, hey, here's a great new screen you guys might want to look at some of the time. Now it is, with the exception of the offense screen, perhaps the most viewed panel in Qradar. But it comes right down to it. This is about security intelligence. This is what we do, and it keeps getting better.